Hey there, I'm Terrie, and I'm the intuitive healer for folks who have anxiety and want to access their soul evolution and intuition. There's more than meets the eye here as we chat and hang out in these episodes that have spiritual, esoteric, multidimensional, somatic, quantum techniques, tools, and tips to help you get unstuck and move you forward in your day-to-day life. So join me in discovering your path to help you clear anxiety of the past, align your energy to the present, and create your new future. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Portal with Terrie Huberman. How is your heart? How's that wonderful, beautiful, dynamic heart of yours? I hope it's well. I hope it's balanced. In these days, there's a lot that's going on. So please, please, please make sure that you're taking care of your heart. I'm really excited for today's guest. You can see her if you're already watching this on YouTube. We are speaking today with Reverend Rose Hope. And let me just tell you a little bit about her first, and then I'm just going to hand it over. And we're just going to get all up in this because I'm so excited for today's topic. So Reverend Rose Hope is a thought leader in spiritual and business development on a mission to elevate how others think and live. Harnessing 20 years of health education and unique life experiences, Reverend Rose Hope is the founder of 6 health businesses, including the first holistic healthcare marketplace of its kind. She's got a podcast also. It's called When Spirit Calls. And she recently released a book titled The Ark. So if you want to learn more, and I hope you do, and I know we're going to be talking more with Reverend Rose Hope, but if you want to learn more about her, her website is rosehope.ca. And I'm going to make sure that I have all this information for you down in the notes section so you can go and check her out. But I am so excited to have you here, Reverend Rose. Hello, hello.
I am so happy to be here. Yes, indeed. Oh, I love your energy, and I'm just so happy to be here.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for being here. So you recently just released a book. Can you tell us a little bit about the book?
Oh, sure. So actually, the book is based on my own experiences. I had 2 near-death experiences. But I didn't want the book to be about me. And so I used a character who had similar near-death experiences. And so it follows this beautiful character named Celeste, and she struggles with her gifts. She struggles with her intuition as she evolves into a young woman. And then in one of the near-death experiences, she goes into the angel kingdom. And so she spends time with the angels and learns from the angels. So it's a beautiful book about connection, about remembrance of who we really are, and tuning into that frequency of really starting to create our heaven on earth here too.
Yeah, I feel like you're hitting on something so important because it's when I work with my clients, I always hit on the remembrance
Yeah.
factor. And you know this very well too. As being a human or in, human form, we forget who we really are. So the
Yeah.
remembrance aspect is actually key in our healing and evolution and transformation. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that because that's one of the things that is just too easy to forget when we're bouncing around here in physical reality.
It
So
sure is. There's so many distractions for us
yeah,
here.
yeah, absolutely. So you are my first guest who I've ever had that we're going to chat and talk with about near death experiences.
Yeah.
The NDEs. I have a girlfriend who has been wishing for an NDE. And I feel weird hearing that because I'm like, okay, that means your physical human kind of might get hurt. You
Yeah.
might experience some sort of physical pain or something. I understand that need or that desire to like want to leave in a way. I've never had, as far as I know, I think I would know. I would hope if I had a near-death experience that I would know. I've been under anesthesia, but I still think that's a different experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
But can you talk to us and explain to us and share with us some of your stories
Oh,
and
yes.
all and like what you learned and what you felt and experienced and all of that.
Yeah, I would love to. And I just want to say before I start to, and this is in regards to your friend that like wants this NDE,
Yeah.
you don't have to have an NDE to have some sort of euphoric, enlightened experience. Like, I just want to put that caveat out there, but I understand why people would want it because my experiences, I craved going back there my whole life.
Yeah.
So I'll talk about that as part of the story, but I just wanted to tell everyone you can become enlightened. You can choose this incredible path without having to have an NDE. So that's what
Yeah.
I want to share.
Thank you.
Self-induce any NDEs here. Okay.
Thank you
All
for
right. So my first you're welcome. You're welcome. And I get it. I get it because I know that feeling of craving that and wanting that. But let me start with my first near death when I was 5. So I was eating one of those round jawbreaker candies. Do you remember those round hard candies?
Yeah.
And I was walking around the house sucking on this jawbreaker. And my dad said, Deanne, go sit down before you choke. So Deanne is my birth name for those of you that are listening. Reverend Rose Hope is my higher self name. And so as I go to sit down, of course, I take a breath in and I choke. So this jawbreaker gets lodged into my throat. My dad comes running behind me. He starts doing the Heimlich. I remember in my 5-year-old mind thinking my head was going to pop off. Like that was the thought that was so clear in my mind. It didn't pop off, but I went limp in my dad's arms. And when I went limp in his arms, I had an out of body experience. I floated above my body, watching my dad below. I remember seeing my mom running to the kitchen for the phone, my older sister peeking around the corner to see what the commotion was. But I didn't feel any of the chaos below. Terrie, I felt joy. I felt peace. I felt heavenly, if you can imagine. And it just felt so easy. And so I just was observing this happening below. And it really was probably only a few minutes, but I felt like I was just sitting there, just hanging out. And my dad did what you're actually not supposed to do. He actually used his thumb, he pushed against my throat, got enough leverage, and he was able to get that out. My mom tells me to this day she was sure that I was dead, like that like she had lost me forever. And so I came back to, and I had all my face blood vessels had broken. So I was black and blue my whole face. And it took a couple days for those physical symptoms to go away. But what I noticed and what my mom really noticed is I became a lot more sensitive to energy. I started to have premonitions. So I would wake up and I would have known when people have died. Like I remember one day in particular, I came into the kitchen. I said, Mom, Tyler's mom died last night, and my mom's jaw almost hit the floor because she had just got off the phone with the neighbor to say that sure enough, that person's mom had died. So these things started to happen, but I was raised in a Catholic home. So, mom didn't really know what to do with me. It was very loving. I had a great upbringing, but um, I had these weird things were happening and I could feel the discomfort of that. So as many of us do, we kind of close those up. We kind of, hide those away. And so as I fast forwarded into, my teenage years and adulthood, I really struggled trusting my intuition. I struggled seeing the sensitivities that I had as a gift. And in fact, I almost felt like I was cursed in a way.
Sure. I can
Right.
see
And I think a lot of people do who have these sensitivities. So I decided to pursue a career in EMS. So I became an EMT and firefighter because my dad saved my life and I wanted to save lives too. And then spirits started to come home with me. So I really was like, I'm losing my mind. I've got PTSD. So I ended up leaving that career, going into the dental career of all fields. And then I taught. And I loved teaching. I had such a passion for teaching, but I had really put away that spiritual side of myself. I didn't want to go there because I thought it was so scary to me to like do the inner work and to deal with the trauma. So I just kept pushing it aside and playing this game of, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when I'm married and I'll be happy when I have kids. By the way, that's a losing game, everybody.
that.
So I hit 26 years old and I was going through what I would call a bit of a quarter life crisis. I was struggling to find my way and again, struggling with the happiness piece and figuring things out. And I had a second near death. Now, the second near death was very different from the first. I was actually recovering from knee surgery. So, another reason why I left EMS was because I had a torn ACL, struggling to lift the heavier patients and things like that. And so I had this reconstructive surgery. So I was recovering at home. And I was on crutches, hobbling from the kitchen to the living room where I kind of had set up a bed. And my brother-in-law was tending to me at that time. It was quite an invasive surgery. And all of a sudden, as I'm trying to move from one place to another, everything started to go black. You know that feeling when you're about to faint and you start to see black spots or whatever? That's what started to happen for me. And all of a sudden, I was somewhere else. And where I was floating in the most heavenly, blissful state that you can imagine. Like, I don't remember this from my 5-year-old experience, but now here I am as an adult. And oh, I got goosebumps talking about it because it was so magnificent. And I remember briefly thinking about my family and people that I was going to leave behind. But it was like a brief moment. And then it was like it didn't matter, like nothing mattered. And then all of a sudden, I could see these beautiful, bright orbs of light, the
Wow.
brightest colors that you can even imagine, Terry. The closest thing I ever have seen was like this beautiful blue lagoon that I saw in the South Pacific Ocean. That color was just, the vibrant colors were just so magnificent. I can't even begin to describe it. And the feeling was such a feeling of euphoria. Like it was incredible. And I remember the conscious thought, I'm staying here. This is amazing. And I felt this unconditional love. And again, these beautiful orbs of light, I know were angels. I knew in my consciousness that this is what angels were. And I can see why we depict them with wings because they're this beautiful color. And then there's like these orbs of color behind them. So they surrounded me. It was like I was completely enveloped in their love. And so I said, I'm staying here. And they said, sorry, you've got work to do. Now, they didn't speak it in words. It was a frequency, but I understood it in my mind. It was like it made perfect sense in my mind. And so, as in many near deaths, you have work to do. And so I came to. So I awoke with my brother-in-law staring at me, and he got me to my bed. And we kind of like, I didn't really know what had just happened. It
Yeah.
was so overwhelming and it was so divine that I couldn't even put it into words. And so I didn't say anything right away. And as the days progressed, I was like, I got to talk about this. Like, this was too profound. In my ego mind, I was like, people are going to think I'm lost my mind and I'm crazy. So I was afraid to speak it. But I started I decided I'm going to start telling some people that I love that are close to me, the safe people, right?
Sure.
So a girlfriend came over to visit as I'm in recovery, and we're sitting there and I'm telling her about this story. And I'm like, I was with angels. Like, I'm telling her the story. My brother-in-law was in the other room, but he overheard. And he came running into the kitchen. He slammed his hand on the counter. He said, I knew it. I felt them too.
Oh man. Talk about
Terry,
validation.
right? And I needed that validation. So he explained to me that when I went unconscious, he couldn't find a pulse. He didn't think I was breathing. He was about to call 911. He had no idea what had happened. I could have had some response to medication or whatever. We still don't even know. Doesn't matter. Point being, he went into panic mode. He was looking for the phone and he said he felt the angels come in. And he couldn't just, he said he didn't know what it was, but he felt these energies, he says, that came in. And he heard them say, she's going to be fine. And within a few seconds, he said he took a breath. When he heard that, he took a breath, he looked at me, and my eyes started to open, and I had a smile on my face.
Smile. After all that just happened to your human, and here you are smiling.
Well, I just came from heaven, so I
Yeah.
must have, had that in my, in my tissues, so to speak. So, that to me was such a beautiful experience. And there are talks with NDEs where other people also experience part of the NDE, but haven't died alongside the person, but they've felt something as well. And so it was a beautiful, like you said, validation for me. So then I was like, okay, I know what I need to do. I need to start sharing the story. I need to start leaning into this. Now, a lot of people will say, well, after that second near death, you probably figured life out. No, no, no. It took me a little while still. Okay. It took me about another 5 or 6 years of growth and discovery because I still was playing I'll Be Happy When game because I wanted that taste of heaven so bad. I thought I needed to find it outside of myself. I thought happiness was outside of me. I would, get the job and I had my babies and I got married to a lovely human being. I had all these things. I thought all of those things would allow me to tune into that frequency, that heavenly space that I was at. I craved it. I wanted to go back there
Sure.
so badly. And in fact, when it really changed was this. I was in postpartum. My son was 6 months old. And I was really struggling. I was feeling so lost. I was feeling so in such despair. I was in such emotional pain. And I was also angry at myself because I had done everything I thought God wanted me to do in giving me these second and third chances to live again. And yet I was still feeling so empty and lost. And I thought I had really messed up. And so one night I was contemplating my life. And you might think, well, you had kids. How could you even imagine thinking that? But when you're in such a deep place of despair, you think you're not of value to other people. And so
Right.
I thought that I was going to bring everyone down with me. And so I was in that place. It was dark. And I decided to pray. And I said, okay, God, I can't see another path. You need to show me one because my path right now is coming home to you. That's what I'm doing here. I'm going to come home to you if you don't show me another path. And the most beautiful thing happened. I was visited by a divine angelic being. And at the time, I didn't even understand that's what it was. But I could feel the presence of this angelic being. And they showed me a vision. I saw this vision that I was going to create this holistic healthcare system. And I knew that that was my way out. And so the next morning, I got up, I started that business. And
Wow.
that business led me into this spiritual path. I didn't know it was going to lead me there, but I started working this business. And then I started to meet people who did the Akashic records and did mediumship and all of these modalities that I, from a science background, because I was very science, right, an analytical background, I really leaned in. And it's funny because I took some of the courses as a skeptic. I'm like, there's no way people can read energy like this. This is all hocus pocus, woo woo stuff. And so I went in there, thinking that it was going to be a very different outcome. And I went in there and the floodgates opened. The Akashic Records was my first introduction. And I was beyond flabbergasted. I was like, oh my God, I can do this. Like this is amazing. Like, what is happening? I don't know, but something is really magical here. And that's when I really started to understand that all this time I had buried these gifts. All this time I was so afraid to walk the path into my soul, afraid of what I would have to unpack and deal with, when really that was the most beautiful divine path I could have possibly taken.
Yeah, it's very interesting how some people's path have to be more dramatic and chaotic, and some people's path are just like, well, here it is,
Yeah.
and it does sound like there were some nudges and pushes.
Oh, many.
Yeah, until I mean that literally had to affect your human ceasing to exist, which is really interesting because a lot of people fear that, and it's that fear that stops them, but you actually had it and it still sort of stopped you until you had to just completely surrender and just go, okay, here's the white flag. I get
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
Exactly. I had to surrender. I had to surrender. And, this whole idea. many of us feel so restricted in this human body,
Yeah.
right? We feel like, it's a burden in a way. And I felt like it was burdened because I was very sick most of my life as well. So I felt a lot of resistance to being stuck in this three-dimensional form.
Yeah.
And I can give myself grace now and say, no wonder you didn't want to be here. Like it makes sense. But there's a deeper invitation there to witness that our soul loved us so much that when it was choosing this physical form, it said, out of all the thousands of babies that it could have chosen, it chose my life. It chose my timeline because it knew that that was the timeline that was going to get me to my highest evolution yet.
I love that perspective. It's so compassionate because a lot of the times, and I've been guilty of this too. So I am not perfect in any way, but I have had tendencies, and I think it's part of the human blueprint to look at the negative first,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But the perspective and the point of view that you just gave was just so loving and kind and compassionate that it's like, no, your soul is here to actually help you, the human, you know,
yes.
like how do we get them to speak together?
Yes. And
So
that brings up something really beautiful because thousands of years ago in the cave people days, the ego part of our brain, part of ourselves, it would tell us, hey, watch, run from the predators, it would warn us when we weren't safe. But over thousands of years, that ego mind has not been put in check. So the ego mind that we call the false self in metaphysics, that ego mind comes in and it says, oh, you can't start a podcast, or you don't know what you're doing. You can't become a coach, or you can't start a business. And it's telling you all these things with an intention to keep you safe. However, what it's actually doing is holding us hostage.
yeah,
And we've allowed it to limit our power of free will, which is one of the biggest gifts that we have here as human beings. And I want to just bring up a story to really enforce this. So I was working on a degree in my 20s as well. It was a health management degree, and I was doing it distance, raising my family, but I was finally at the home stretch, right at the finish line. I was writing my last test for my last course. But prior to that, in my second last class, I had failed an exam for the first time ever. It was a tough class and I'd failed. I rewrote it with success, but now here I am on the last class, the last test. My ego's coming in and saying, oh, you're going to fail. You're failing. You don't know the answers. You don't know the answers. By the time I was done writing the test, I was so distraught. I ran to my car. I bawled my eyes out. I called my husband. I said, I failed. I'm going to have to rewrite. Like, I just want this to be done. I'm almost done. And now I'm not. And I was so upset. I got home and I messaged my professor and I say, I know I failed this test. Can you tell me which areas I need to focus on? Because I want to prepare for the rewrite. And she writes me back so lovingly and says, I don't know whose test you think you wrote, but you got 87.
the test probably.
Oh my gosh. You guys, the point of all of this, of course, is the power of that ego mind.
Yeah,
And most of the time, it's full of BS.
yeah,
Most of the time, it's making up stories,
yeah,
right? You failed before, so you're going to fail again, right? So it's so powerful, and we let it drive the car. We let it run the show. But this is the reminder for us. It just doesn't know its boundaries. So
yeah,
just like a child or just like a friend who oversteps boundaries, the ego needs to be put in place. So the invitation and the biggest thing that I learned from all of this was to build a relationship within these aspects of our being. We
yes,
are multidimensional. So building a relationship with that ego mind helps us to get it into place. It helps us to override the stories it's telling us. And what it does is in doing that, it unlocks the channel of our God mind or our divine mind or our higher mind. So there's some magic to that. And so one of the things that I encourage my clients to do is to be the observer within themselves, but to take it a step further, give your ego mind a name. Give it a name. You know this, hey? Like
yeah.
this, it's such a powerful way. I had a client the other day. She's like, I'm calling mine Ivana Gripe a lot. Isn't that hilarious? Isn't that cute? You can call it whatever you want,
Yeah.
but the idea is that you're befriending this part of yourself.
Yeah.
And so instead of letting it hold you back, you can actually start to glean a lot of wonderful information. The ego will start to tell you things. And then you can start to reprogram yourself. And not only that, but even just saying the words, thanks, ego, but I've got this, it starts to know where the boundaries are and it starts to get quieter.
Yeah.
My ego is so much more quiet now than it ever was before.
Yeah. And it's a work in progress. It's definitely something that
Mm.
I know until I
Yeah.
leave my earth suit, I will be, dealing with it. But it's
Yeah.
so funny because for me, I have an alter ego, which is obviously the ego, and it's of a
Yeah.
mad scientist. And I haven't named it, but it looks like Doc Brown.
Ah, I
Back
saw that
to
image. That's exactly the image I saw. That's amazing. Love it.
what I do, like how I approach, I guess, fearful scenarios or situations is as an experiment.
Love it.
Because
Beautiful. I love that perspective. Yeah.
for me, the anxiety that I can experience is pretty big. So I have to sort of grasp it
Yeah.
and manage it, right? Because
Yeah.
it's my higher soul that's going, you got this. And then my body has to go, okay, now I got to do this to get this, right?
Yes.
So I do my best. And again, it's just it's a constant practice to approach this a situation as this mad scientist doing an experiment, because then it puts me into a feeling of curiosity
Yes.
where there's no attachment to an outcome or result, and then I can't get disappointed or I
Yeah.
can't get angry. I mean, I still can, of course,
Yes. Yes.
but at least like the suffering aspect
Yes.
is sort of neutralized. I'm always like, the big word with me is neutral. Just be neutral, because then you can find the solutions or have them come
Yeah.
to you. You
It's
know, a lot of my clients, and I say we because I am my client,
yeah.
we are very sensitive. So everything you were talking about, getting that higher sensitivity and overthinking.
Yeah.
Right. And then that tendency to become overwhelmed and anxious, well, that ego is going to go alert, alert, alert. We have to save our human and basically put out all of the coping skills and all the mechanisms to try and keep the human alive, which is totally false.
Right.
So everything you're saying, it's interesting because I have not had a near-death experience as far as I'm aware,
Right.
but I've had some weird multi-dimensional experiences where I think there's similarities. I don't think it's the same thing, but I think there's similarities in that
Absolutely.
sensation or feeling of just everything is okay. Now you felt love, you felt, I feel like you had higher realms that you visited that I haven't yet.
Yeah.
Who knows when it'll happen? But, and it does, I don't have to have an NDE to have that experience, but there is something where you kind of can feel, even with an awareness, like in, let's just say, a now moment without having to be unconscious or whatever, that
Mhm.
all is well and everything is okay. And I
Mhm.
feel like the more we can get to that place, the more we can start leaning into our gifts and surrender into
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
So I love how you said we don't have to have an NDE. Some people do. It's
Hmm.
part of their experience.
That's right.
Um, so let me ask you this question. Have you been able to, without an NDE, have you been able to recreate those sensations and those feelings and the visuals and all that without chemical
Yes.
alteration too?
Yes, indeed, without chemicals. So,
Share
you
that,
know,
please.
yeah, well, I kind of alluded to it when I took the Akashic Records. So the Akashic Records is your soul's library or God's library. It is the place that the closest place that I have found being in this three-dimensional form in which we can access some of the most incredible divine insight and information and sensation. So it's the closest that I have found to that. And the Akashic Records is opened using a prayer, meditation, and it is a state of consciousness that we can go into. That's the beauty of it. We can elevate, we can go into these other frequencies and states of consciousness. We have the ability to do that. And many of us have shut down that inner technology. And so there's an invitation for us to recognize that we have these incredible sacred gifts of intuition, clairvoyancy, clairaudience, and we have access to this. We have full access to this at any time. And it is an inward, if you will, journey. It is not, again, it's not found out there. So the Akashic Records is the closest that I have found in which we can get to that state. Now, some people can do breath work and get to that state as well. And in some of the breath work I've done, I've had some pretty profound spiritual experiences as well. But most certainly, it is an open invitation for us to come into recognizing that heaven and God or creator, whatever you call source, is not far out there. It's actually already been given to us. It is within us. And so being, raised Catholic, I believed, God was a man in the sky, right? You'll hear me reference it as a he sometimes because that
Right.
was the conditioning I was brought up in. And so, I was so far removed from God in so many ways. And so I had to redefine what God was for me
Yeah.
and how I connected to God, and realizing that I have God within me, that I don't need to seek anywhere outside of myself, that everything that I need is actually right here. And in creating that relationship with that ego self or the false self, I also stepped into that relationship with my God self. So I have a very intimate relationship now with God. So much so that I can tune into that heavenly space almost like in a snap of a finger. So I don't need to have anything outside of myself in order to experience that. In fact, God reminds us so often that if we want to create heaven on earth, we must feel it and embody it and see it and witness it within ourselves first.
Yeah.
And so that's the biggest invitation for humanity, where we fall away from this place of judgment of this is good or bad or right or wrong. And we forge this deeper connection and deeper relationship with divine or God, again, whatever you want to call that. Excuse me. There's a story that comes to mind, and I want to share it with all of you because it's a very potent story in terms of falling away from that judgment. And you might have heard this story before in your path. It's a story about a farmer and a horse. And this is his prized possession. This stallion horse is his bread and butter. And one day the horse goes missing. And all the villagers look for this horse. They can't find the horse anywhere. And the neighbors come to the farmer and they say, "Oh, this is the worst news ever. What will you do without your horse? What are you going to do? This is so bad." And the farmer shrugs and says, "Who knows what's good or bad? We'll have to wait and see." So the next day comes along, and of course, the horse comes back, but with a herd of wild horses. So now we've got all these other horses, and the neighbors come over and they say, "Oh, this is the best news ever. Now you've got all these horses and da da da." And the farmer says, "Who knows what's good or bad? We'll have to wait and see." And the next day comes along, and the farmer's son is out training the horses, and he gets bucked off and breaks a leg. And the neighbors come over and they say, "Oh, what are you going to do without your son? This is the worst news ever." And the farmer says, "Who knows what's good or bad? We'll have to wait and see." And the next day comes along, and the army comes to town, and they're taking all the fit soldiers. They can't take the son. He's got a broken leg. So you can see how this story could go on forever. The moral of the story is not not that we don't celebrate when things are going good, but it's more back to your perspective of neutrality,
Yeah.
right? Everything is perfectly in place. When we get into anxiety and worry, what we're actually saying is we're saying, "I don't trust that divine is taking care of me." And we actually inadvertently block what can be provided to us. And so that's not to feel bad about. It's just an awareness to
Yeah.
recognize that, wait a second, I am being taken care of. And I invite you listening to think about times when you thought it was the worst thing ever. Maybe you lost a job or went through a breakup or whatever. And you thought, "Oh my God, this is the worst thing ever." Only to find out as you get to the other side of that, that that might have been the best thing to ever happen to you.
Yeah.
So we are being invited to fall away from the judgment. We're being invited to look at things with a more neutral perspective and say, oh, that's interesting. Like you said, be more curious. I like to talk about it as awe and wonder. Ooh, I wonder what is that is all about. I wonder why that's showing up for me. Because in mysticism, they have something called continual expectancy. And continual expectancy does not mean we expect a particular outcome, but a continual expectancy means that we expect that whatever it is that's showing up for us in our world is exactly what we need for our highest good and the highest good of others.
Yes.
But we get swallowed up into the story of it, and
Yes.
then we end up suffering, right, Terrie?
Yes.
And we're in pain about it. But really, there's opportunity, there's value in everything.
Yes.
God, divine is in everything, even in this tricky, sticky stuff.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of distortion in the spiritual world, which I think, or at least it feels like to me, comes from like the manifestation world. And it almost like creates separation because of duality, which is why I'm always, and it's for me too. I'm always putting my hand on my heart. Like I'm all about the heart just because of the potency and the intelligence of the heart from that scientific perspective with heart coherence. We literally can activate the energy of the heart to neutralize energy and frequency. And again, there's that word neutral, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like everything that you were just saying is about acceptance of the whole and not the separation. And so it's understanding, and which is like a perfect depiction from the story you just shared, is that we may not know why, how, or when, but everything will always work out to our benefit.
Yes.
Sometimes, and this is so important, I literally have on my phone programmed to show up every hour that I say the story is still unfolding
Yes.
because that helps me from a mental perspective go, okay, this is not necessarily the end.
Yes.
Let's wait and see what happens. It's
Exactly.
not good or bad. Let's wait and see. And when I practice what I preach, and when my clients practice what I preach and we do it together, they get those same results. So, a lot of what you're saying, what I love about it is that there's an actual scientific aspect to it that can be recreated.
Yes.
And
Yes.
when we can recreate this over and over and over again through consistent practice, we do start to trust it.
We do. It validates it. It gives us evidence.
Evidence.
Because again, we still have this very logical part of us, right? And so we do have to, in some ways, appease that too.
Yeah.
And so, you can reflect on in the past where things actually did turn out, in the big picture, right?
Yeah.
And that can bring validation. But as you're practicing it, it just adds to the confidence and the trust. People are like, well, how do I lean into trust in God again? How do I lean into trusting that I am being taken care of? Well, you start to practice the trust.
Yeah.
And the more that you trust, the more you get to receive in that. The other part of it is to also recognize that we are co-creators here. And so some people will get into the thought that, like, oh, I'm just going to manifest it in my mind and then it's going to happen. And then they're frustrated when it doesn't happen. And it's because there is an invitation for us to take some action and participate in that unfolding of life. For
Yeah.
us to say, oh, yes, I'm going to step in here. I'm going to do something about that. And sometimes the doing is about healing. Sometimes the doing is recognizing that we can move energy and we can alchemize energy. And I think that's really important for us. When something shows up in our life and say we get triggered by something, we can get into blame and we can get into all sorts of stories about it. But there's a bigger invitation for us to leverage that experience to say, what is in it for me? because in everything, there's something in it for us.
Yeah.
Even if we're perceiving it as a bad experience or it doesn't feel good, there's still something in it. And when we can look at it from that perspective, then we get to receive so much more of the wisdom and the value. I'll give you an example. Say you are feeling some guilt. Okay. Say you're feeling guilty about how you responded to a situation, or you're feeling like you're not enough but for whatever reason. Okay. So rather than looking at the guilt and being like, I don't like that feeling, which is our tendency, right? Our tendency is to push it away, to say, to reject it. I don't want to feel that way. So I'll just distract myself with work or with drugs or with whatever else, right?
Right.
Rather than push that away. The invitation is that we lovingly hold space for that. And that doesn't mean that we get swallowed up by it. What it means is that we're going to look at that guilt. And I like to encourage my clients, they cup their hands and they hold it like they're holding a little bunny or a bird or something.
Love
And they say,
that.
oh, hi, guilt. You're really causing me some trouble here, guilt. I'll tell it like it is, right? If it's grief, I'm usually bawling, grief, I see you. I know you're teaching me something, right? But I have a conversation with that energy, because that energy, just like children, just like us, it just wants to be seen and heard. That's what it needs. And so if we don't allow ourselves to see it and hear it, that energy actually just gets denser, and then it sits in our body, or it cycles back around in another experience,
Yes,
right?
it does.
Yeah. So now we look at it, we say, I see you. I see you, guilt. I see that you're showing up for me. What is it that I need to learn from you? What are you trying to show me? And even just having that conversation, even if you don't get an insight right away, even if you think you get nothing, the value is in seeing and hearing that energy. And that energy already no longer holds the density that it once had. So already you're setting yourself free. And then what will happen is, in doing so, you'll start to get this thought, or eventually down the road, you'll get this idea and be like, oh my God, that guilt showed up because, when I was younger, I was told that I needed to feel guilty in order to be forgiven. That was that for me, that was part of my story, right? I
Yeah.
better sit in the guilt and the shame
Yeah.
and feel that, right? Yeah, no Freudian slip there on the shit, right?
But both happens.
But both happened, right? Like,
And
yes. So we can sit in the pile of that,
yeah,
right? Or we can choose to say, what is in this for me? And now we start to leverage. Now we start to, again, see things as this opportunity, not as judging and shaming a feeling or an experience as good or bad, but rather lovingly accepting and saying, oh, there's some gold in here. There's something really good in this for me. And then once we're leveraging that, it's like, we just come into this place of receiving. So every opportunity and every experience is abundant for us.
that's really fantastic. I actually really like that. What's in it for me? Because a lot of the times we use it so this is I feel like there's the distinction or the differentiation between being selfish is self-interest. It's actually taking care of the self for learning, evolving, and expansion. So the what's in it for me, from what I'm understanding and feeling of what you're teaching right now in this now moment, is about learning and how we can meet that frequency, that energy, that emotion, that feeling. What's in it for me? That's super key. I feel like that's a really big thing. So, all you guys watching and listening, Reverend Rose just gave us some really good gold nuggets here. So, take that and run, y'all.
Oh, it's been like a secret
Yeah.
sauce for me.
Secret.
Because I
Yeah.
used to wallow in my emotions. I would feel the emotions. I would feel them so heavily because I
Sure,
was an empath and sensitive to
sure,
energy.
sure.
And I would pick up on other people's energy as
Yeah.
well, and then get swallowed in that. And spirit really guided me. There's an easier way. It's more simple than you think. And
Yeah.
it's, oh my gosh. And then I started to get all these lessons and all these learnings and all these ahas. And then I was able to say to myself and give myself grace and say, no wonder I felt that way. No wonder I showed up in that way. Right. And so giving myself that grace allowed me to not be sitting in that cesspool as well. Right.
It's interesting because right now what's coming to me is that could be a type of reparenting, actually.
Yeah.
Like, well, no wonder I chose this or had that action or behavior because look at da 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 da. But again, like you said, until you start clearing out some of that density by actually giving it attention, even if you don't get the answer right in that now moment, you know, you do clear out that energy and then this can come up and then that, but that's part of the process also of self-forgiveness too, which is so important. So this is so beautiful. Everything you're saying like just resonates so much. I'm like,
Um,
pause, because I don't know if you feel this way or you get this way, but as somebody who serves and gives and then also chooses, okay, so I am making a very conscious choice to receive an income this way and make this part of my job. It is so nice to get it back and to receive from somebody who, I feel like you're at a higher level than I am, which feels good. It's not like an egotistical type thing, but it's like I can learn from that. So I really do appreciate you being here because I feel like I'm learning from you. So,
I'm
yeah.
so happy to hear that. I'm learning from you too, so don't forget that as well. We get to learn from each other here, and that's the beauty in coming into this space of receiving, which I want to talk about just briefly too, because
Sure.
I think it's really powerful for us right now to
Yeah.
understand how it works. I believed that to be in service, I need to give.
Yeah.
And so I became a people pleaser to the point of my own detriment, which you, I'm sure, can relate to. And so I would give and I would give and I would give and I'd be like, I'm trying so hard. Why is this not coming back to me? Why is this not coming back to me? But what I've realized, what I now understand is that to be in true service, it means giving freely, but knowing we get something in return.
Sure.
Knowing we get something because it feels so good to give.
Yeah.
But we've got to have the knowing that we get something in return because that opens up this gateway of receiving. We cannot fully give if we are not prepared to fully receive. And most of us are like blocked on the receiving
Yeah.
because we feel like unworthy of
Sure.
receiving, or we feel like to be in service means that I have to expect nothing back, right? I'm getting something back because it feels so good. And
Yep.
even just that acknowledgement alone, it opened up a pathway of that revenue and that money to come back. And one of the practices that I have around receiving is to practice saying, I receive that. So when someone gives me a compliment, I say in my head, sometimes out loud, I receive that. When you said that, I thought, I receive that. When someone gives you a hug, I receive that hug, and practice that art. But here's a bigger perspective for you. Divine is our supply.
Yeah.
And so, as we anchor that understanding in, it's like, okay, God is supplying me with everything, even the money. If I'm paying you for something, Terrie, it's actually not coming from me, it's coming from divine. And so, when we open that up, then when people don't pay us, because I had that happen a few times, as part of my lesson in learning, when people don't pay us, it's like, it's okay because divine's my supply. And I know that that's going to come back in some way, in some form. And so really anchoring that understanding in that everything comes from source, everything. And so when we come to that place, then we realize then we're also not taking from another, because that was another block I had, was that I thought if I was receiving, that I was taking from somebody else. You know
That's
that feeling?
that's
Yes.
a real thing. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And so now that I understand that divine is the supply and everything comes from divine, I don't feel like I'm being greedy or taking from another when I charge for my services because I know divine is the supply.
Yeah.
One of the other fun little practices that I have, and I encourage people to try this, especially if they've been feeling like they put so much out and they've really gotten not much back, invoice God.
Oh my God, that's brilliant.
Send divine an invoice. Now, I can't take credit because my beautiful friend, April Joy, was the one that spoke about that, where I heard that from. But, I don't necessarily go in QuickBooks and make an invoice, but I
Sure.
will say to God, because I give 30% of my services away every year. And
Yeah.
so I'll say to Divine, I'll say, okay, Divine, I'm invoicing you for this. Thank you so much.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, April Joy. That's a
Yeah.
really great exercise. That helps so much. A lot of people that I see, and myself included, have money anxieties.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a really, really cool technique to
Yeah.
build trust.
It
So,
is. It is. And it doesn't always show up in the way you think it is.
right,
People ask
exactly.
for signs and they're like, there's no signs.
Yeah.
Like they say, give me a sign of an eagle, and they're looking in the sky for the eagle, but then the person standing next to them has a tattoo of an eagle. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? We miss the signs, right? And
Yeah.
so, God, spirit works in this way where it's like abundance is everywhere. It might be an abundance of love. It might be an abundance of nature. So it can show up in other ways. Your job is to witness the abundance that's already available to you now, because that in itself will increase your vibrational frequency
Sure.
in which you can see more of what it is that you are after,
Yeah.
right?
I love,
So yeah, it's a beautiful way to shift that perspective, I think. And
yeah.
it's a game changer for me. I can't even begin to tell you the stories of abundance from that space. Yeah.
I want to practice this invoicing God. I feel like, okay, that'll be fun. I'm gonna play around with that again, experiment, right? I'm gonna totally
Yeah.
experiment.
Hmm.
Well, Reverend Rose, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for coming. I gave your website out earlier, and I'm going to give it out again, and it'll be in the description notes
Yeah.
everywhere where this podcast is going to be published. But can people find you anywhere else, like on social media? Can they follow you or do any
Yes,
things?
absolutely. Please. Yes, I'm on Instagram, Rose Hope Soul. You can find me on
Great.
Instagram. That's kind of one of the main places I spend some time in. I would also, I'm going to put it in the show notes as well, a
Okay.
link for people to do a little soul blueprint quiz.
Oh,
So
I
you
love
can
that.
discover a little bit more about your soul blueprint. And then there's a gift at the end of that little quiz as well for everybody. So we'll put that in there. And the book, The Ark, is on Amazon. So if you search The Ark with my name, Rose Hope, you will find the book. And, if it calls to you, if it speaks to you, of course, you can check it out from there.
Thank you. This has been great. Everybody go follow, like, subscribe, share, tell all your friends, all the things.
Thank you.
And
Thank
thank you all for watching on YouTube and for listening on all of the platforms to the Portal with Terrie Huberman. I'm very grateful that you guys give me an option to speak with, learn from other wonderful experts and all the stories that you share with me and giving me a place to share what I can share with you. So thank you. I just from the bottom of my heart, take care of your heart. So
Ah,
because
thank
it's
you.
so important. And yes, I will see you guys on the flip side. Thank you again and talk soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, our time in this now moment together has ended, but another now moment is on its way. Thank you so much for joining me in this human journey and listening to this podcast, The Portal with Terrie Huberman. I sure hope you're getting something out of it. I'm here to help you clear anxiety from the past, align your energy into the present, and help you create your future. My prayer for you is to find the peace and calmness in any given now moment so you can recognize when blessings are afoot and you get to choose your next adventure. Be curious and stay connected. You can always find me at terriehuberman.com. Bye now.